Hey, it's Yassine here, and welcome to a new episode on the Field Service Excellence Show. To kick things off, I want to share with you a quick story. In a small town in Georgia, Ben and Alex had opened up a repair shop across from each other. Both had graduated from the same technical school and went through the same training. They were very much alike, these two young technicians. 5 years had passed by, and these two met again at their association's regional meeting. They were still very much alike. They still had their shops running on the same street, and they were servicing the same customer base, commercial kitchen facilities. But there was a difference. Alex was still running jobs himself and had very few customers, while Ben, on the other hand, had built a huge book of business and had to hire over 30 technicians to keep up with demand. Have you ever wondered, just as I have, what makes such a difference when growing a service company? And you know, it's not always about better technical skill set or dedication. It's not that one wanted success and the other didn't. The difference lies in focus on the customer and their end-to-end experience, and not just fixing the equipment. And that all starts with customer service, which is why I'm really excited to do a deep dive in this episode into operational excellence and customer service, so you can deliver a 5-star service experience and grow your business. And to do that, I've got Mario here, our VP of Transformation, who works with our customers to transform their customer service department and help them grow their business. Mario, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm glad to be back, and I really hope Alex is listening to our episode today.
I hope so too.
We have a lot to say about customer service, right? And customer service is like the foundation of a beautiful house, right? No matter how beautifully the house is constructed, it all depends on the foundation. And if the foundation is weak, over a period of time, the house will definitely crumble.
That's a great analogy. Absolutely.
And customer service, right? That's the first touch point for a customer. You mess that up, it has a domino effect on all the downstream process, right?
Right.
And analyzing about 9,000 reviews from the field service companies, we observed 67% of those reviews had bad customer experience. And what we could say is a large part of that is contributed by customer service.
Right, breakdowns and customer service, right.
And that's the key part of it, because customer service is the first touch point, and like the old saying goes, first impression is a lasting impression.
Absolutely. I mean, customer service plays such a critical role when it comes to delivering a great customer experience. So let's define it a little bit. So where does customer service begins? Where does it end? I know different companies kind of have it designed differently. So where does it start? Where does it end?
So broadly, customer service starts at the first point of contact, and that could be through email, through phone calls, through chat.
So taking in a service call.
Whenever you get a service call, right?
Right.
But it doesn't stop there. Every time a customer calls in to follow up on a dispatch or technicians, ETA, or follow up on a part procurement, or even sometimes billing disputes, right?
Right.
So customer service has, a touch point to most part of the customer's journey.
Across the journey, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how do you measure success? So how do you know whether you're doing a good job or a bad job? How do we look at customer service objectively to understand what are the areas to improve?
So let's break down the KPIs, right? And what the KPIs are, why we are measuring them,
right,
and what you need to measure with those KPIs.
And the benchmarks. And let's also talk about the benchmarks. Yeah.
So, the first category would be KPIs that are channel agnostic, right?
Right.
And which impact all channels.
Whether it's phone, email, portal, right.
Yeah. And those are like first contact resolution,
okay,
which generally is measured at 80%.
And what do you define as first contact resolution?
The first contact resolution basically is when the customer, calls in or send you an email or, is chatting with you, you're able to resolve the customer's query or, put in the service request at that instance without them having to, follow up or do a second call or send you another email.
Touch.
On the first touch itself,
Makes
you're
sense.
able to kind of fulfill their query.
And what would be like a benchmark you would look at for first contact resolution?
Generally, the industry standard is 80%.
80%.
To ensure that you have your first contact resolution.
So every 8 queries out of 10 should be resolved on the first attempt.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, makes sense.
And then, of course, the next measure is CSAT, measuring customer service CSAT. So, just the interaction that they had with the customer service
And
representative.
CSAT stands for
Customer satisfaction.
customer
right?
satisfaction,
So,
right?
And there are various ways to measure it. You could either send an email right after the service ticket is created. You could have an IVR built-in CSAT right after the call ends, right? So there are
And it's a
various-
survey that you trigger.
That is correct.
Okay.
Just to measure the experience of the interaction with the customer service rep. So yeah, so CSAT, and there's also quality audits, right? Where you could audit the calls that the customer service rep handled, or the email they responded to, the chat conversations, or response to the portal.
Right.
And generally, you measure that at about 95% accuracy or without defects.
And what about CSAT? What would be like a typical benchmark for customer satisfaction?
I think from a
that is
customer
specific,
service,
right?
yeah,
Specific
for
customer
more
service.
specific for customer service, I think it's at 90% as a benchmark for the industry.
90%. Okay.
Yeah, on
Makes
CSAT.
sense. Okay.
And there are other channel level KPIs. So
Right.
let's say if you have support on phones and chat,
Right.
you definitely want to measure the average speed of answer. How fast
That's
are
for
you
the phone.
answering? Yeah, how
Right.
fast are you answering the call or the chat, right? Generally for phones, you want to answer them in 3 rings, and it's measured less than 30 seconds,
Right.
right? But what does that mean? It means that you need to at least answer 90% of your call within 30 seconds, and that's what we call service level.
Service
in our
level.
industry. Yeah.
Okay.
So maintaining about 90% of the calls within 30 seconds, but also ensuring that you answer at least 97% of the calls. So not more than 3% of your calls are abandoned. right?
Abandonment rates,
So
right?
there are times when there'll be multiple people calling at the same time, and you would have some abandonment, right?
Right. So you need
But-
to answer most phone calls fast.
Fast. That is correct, right? And these days, people's patience run low, and if you're not answering the calls
Right.
on time, they would either go to your competitor or even leave a bad review, right?
Makes sense.
Then the other thing is also about how fast are you, resolving the query on the call. So the average handle time
Average
that you
handle time.
spend with the customer when they first call in to kind
How
of
long does
place
it
in.
take to wrap up the call?
Correct.
Makes sense.
And generally, between 5 to 6 minutes is what the average handle time.
Okay, and
is
that applies for
benchmarked
taking
at.
in a service ticket and working through a dispute over the phone?
That is correct, because even when you get a dispute, right, you need to understand what the dispute is about, get clarity on why it's being disputed, so that it'll help get a better resolution. And when you,
Right.
because customer service is just taking in the dispute, they generally are not accountable or able to resolve it. There's a lot
On the
of
phone, right, back and
a
forth.
lot of back and forth with cross-functional teams.
Right.
So yeah, it's very important to kind of get an understanding of what the dispute is about.
And
right?
don't frustrate the customer by just keeping them on the phone for 15, 20, 30 minutes to understand what's going on,
Absolutely, yeah.
because that's frustrating. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to measure is the turnaround time for emails or service requests coming through your ticketing tool or portals.
And what would
And
you look at as a
generally-
benchmark?
For the average time to respond there is about 1 hour.
Okay.
Yeah, because the people are more patient when they send an email or
Right.
raise a
They don't
ticket on a
expect-
ticket. They don't expect instant
Instant
responses,
response. Makes sense.
as compared to a phone or a chat conversation.
Man, it's so critical that we have these KPIs in place so that we have an objective measure of what's working and what's not working. As the saying goes, you can't improve what you don't measure. So really amazing job breaking this down. So now let's go over what are the most common breakdowns or failure points that you typically see in customer service operations, and maybe let's deep dive into it a little bit more by talking about what causes these breakdowns in the first place. What kind of impact does it typically have on the experience, on the bottom line, on the customer, and then how do you go about resolving it?
Sure, and there could be so many different aspects to customer service, right? But let's cover a few of the major common ones that we see, right?
Makes sense.
And one of them is not picking up the calls at all, right? It's measured as abandoned, as we spoke earlier. So abandoned calls, and that's the biggest impact, right? You're not picking up enough calls, and
Right.
what
So
happens
calls
to that-
going unanswered, basically.
Calls going unanswered, right?
Okay.
And what happens there is, they try a couple of times, you still don't pick up the call. most likely they're going to go to the competition.
Right.
Right. And even versus, they might leave a bad review for you online. Right. And
because people expect like immediate, answer. They've been conditioned. If they call like a restaurant or they order on an app, like the Amazon effect.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there's so much of service available today. If you're not ready to service, they'll just go somewhere else. There's so much of competition.
Money loves speeds, baby.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and what typically causes calls to go unanswered?
Well, one of the most simplest one would be not having enough people to answer the call.
Mm.
Right? It could also be you've not scheduled people in the right time of the day where calls are high. And it could also be, and sometimes we see that, customer service guys are wearing multiple hats. They're doing other kind of jobs apart from, just taking calls. So they could be doing admin work and things like that. Right?
And they're handling portals and chat, and it's all, they're not really prioritizing speed to answer. And that can go, have a high impact on abandonment rate.
Yeah, it's also about how to prioritize those jobs. So they're doing multiple tasks, they don't know what to focus on.
Right. So how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so first, like you mentioned, if you don't have enough people,
right?
And that could happen if you're not monitoring the amount of calls you're getting, at what duration of the day you're getting calls, right? That's the most important part.
So call volumes.
Track your call volumes. You'll be able to forecast the volumes and therefore be able to see what is the capacity you need to manage those, call volumes.
So workforce planning, capacity planning.
Correct.
And is there a tool for that you use?
There are various tools available in the market. And,
right.
We use a few depending on what we're trying. So there's, just at calls, but if you're using multi-channel approach, you need to look at a different way, how to manage a capacity, looking at volumes of emails, of calls. So there are quite a few workforce management.
And you can start like with a simple spreadsheet to just, simplify the process. Yeah. It's just the thought process to like, it's the habit of looking at your call volumes. If you have like pipeline and you're expecting to close like a chain account, it's like, okay, this is going to bring in an additional 1,000 calls in. Do I have enough people? So that's what you're looking at historically and future looking.
Yeah, and historical data will definitely give you some insights, right, on how to plan, and that's critical, right? And when you say, future looking, you need insights from other teams, like let's say marketing team, if they launch something
sales,
new or something different, right? Or if there's an OEM that launched a new product but there's faulty, so those kind of things, right? And those insights can help you forecast as well. So if you like you rightly said, looking at your historical data and future looking as well.
So capacity planning. What else do you?
So apart from them, it's also when you look at the volume, right, and numbers talk, right. You start looking at them, you'll be able to identify where the calls are higher and how to put your people in the right place, right. So scheduling and rostering is also important.
So like time of day,
right, and even after hours or weekends, right. Look at your pattern call on those times of the day or days of the week to be able to identify how your customer flow.
And you see a lot of service companies not prioritizing after hours, or maybe they leave it to the technician, or they rotate phones, right? And that you see a lot of pain point there because frankly speaking, technicians just don't like talking to customers, and so that would have even more impact on your process. So makes sense. So what are some of the other problems that you see in customer service, or the second most common problem?
Yeah, the second most common problem is taking too long to wrap up the call, right? This really frustrates the customer. They're calling in, they want to, put in the service request, and
they're agitated. The equipment is down. Like, don't keep me on the phone for too long.
Absolutely, and that is one of the key aspects, that frustrates customers, and a breakdown in customer service. This generally also increases, the cost of service, right?
Why so?
Because a couple of things, right? One is your talk time is increasing, so obviously you're paying more for the phones. It's also, you have customers waiting in, right? So your CSR is spending more time talking to one customer while there are others.
Right, they're waiting in queue.
Right? Waiting to get someone to talk to. And, that's one of the key issues, even increasing your abandon rate, right?
Right. And so what's the root cause of that? Well, why does this happen?
So primarily this happens because you probably didn't get the right people, right?
What do you
in
mean
terms
by
of
not getting the
profile.
right profile?
So in terms of profile, right, they should be inquisitive and being able to understand the customer's problem, have good listening skill, empathy, right? So getting the right profile
So
is
it's
critical.
personality. It has to do with the
Yes.
personality of the person. You have people who are, you have agents who are more people oriented, and then you have agents who are more analytical. So you're looking at the right profile that by default their behavior would lend them better to such a role in talking to customers and active listening and empathy and all of that.
That is correct. And generally this comes from being in the industry for a while, and also culture has a play to this. And generally we see Filipinos, right, they're culturally very inclined to customer service, right, and very empathetic to customers. So that's important aspect to it. Also adequate training, right, getting people trained both on soft skills and technical skills. They need to understand what the customer is complaining about. They need to have an understanding of the product, the equipment, right, and also some of the key issues of these products, right, because customers generally calling about some frequently occurring issues.
And people think, oh, you're just picking up the phone, like, why can't you, it's not as simple as it may look. How long do you typically put people in a training? Like, what's the duration of a customer service training in your experience?
So it definitely differs depending on the type of equipment you're servicing, right? So generally for a field service company, the services company are servicing so many different equipments and model types, so it probably is longer. But for an manufacturer where the product lines are smaller and the troubleshooting guides are all available in one place, it's shorter, much shorter.
So it varies, like 2 weeks, 4 weeks,
generally
6
between
weeks.
4 weeks to for service companies and 2 weeks for manufacturers.
Makes sense. And how else do you resolve these issues?
So some of the way to resolve these issues, right, first is making sure you have the right people, you hire the right people, the right profile. One of the things we do is we use caliper assessment to see the alignment for the role of the requirement, right? We see that the person is the best fit for the role that we're hiring for.
Right, and there's like in caliper you have like almost 12 dials or behaviors that you assess a person at. Like, are they more people oriented? Are they analytical? Are they fast or slow? So there's so many different things that you assess a person at to make sure that they fit the profile. Makes sense?
And sometimes, like you rightly said, right, some of them may have different level of skills, and some of those skills are trainable. Therefore, upskilling, the customer service rep is also important, and upskilling them both on technical skills and soft skills, right?
And the jargons also.
Oh yeah, the industry jargon is very important, right? I mean, because sometimes you have a facility manager calling and he knows the equipment and using industry jargon, so they should be able to pick those up.
And if they don't, it really, would you say it impacts the customer's trust? Like, okay, like I'm not talking to someone they don't understand me, they don't get it, and it frustrates them. So you talked about hiring the right people, giving them proper training. What else?
Well, giving them proper training is important, right? Apart from the jargons, it's also about active listening, about empathy, right? Because the service manager or the facility manager is calling you, they're already frustrated that the equipment is down. You need to understand their
how to diffuse their anger.
Absolutely, right. And you can't just fix most of the situation over the phone, so they have to be patient for a technician to go on site and things like that. So the other aspect to it is making sure you're monitoring these calls, you're auditing these calls to be able to identify what are the training needs of the CSR. I know you train them right before putting them on calls, but there's always sometime a gap between what's being trained and what's being delivered on the production flow. So you need to identify those training gaps and then upskill them on those.
Right. And that ties to you said the QA score. So is that where your QA score comes from?
That is correct. So you are auditing these calls, and those are sample size, right? And generally you have a higher sample audit for a newer customer rep, while a fewer sample size for a tenured guy.
Right. It's just like a routine, like a quarterly basis or a monthly basis.
I think monthly basis, and just having like 5 to 10 calls per rep is good enough sample, right?
Okay, makes sense.
So that's good. And also, once you kind of do the audits, it also help for newer reps to have role plays, so they can kind of improve their handle time as well. Right? They understand how to probe the questions, how to get the right answers, so they're not kind of going all around.
Right. So you focus on the most common issues or breakdowns that you pick up from listening to the calls, and then you do like a role play, like I play the customer and you're the service rep, and we go back and forth.
Correct.
For that muscle memory.
Yeah, and also sharing best practices from tenured service reps to get out the right information from the customer, so that when the technician looks at the service order, he knows exactly what's wrong and is better prepared.
I would love maybe in a future episode to do a deep dive around like the hiring practices and maybe the training curriculum and how you design these training curriculums. But I know we've got a lot to cover. So what are some of other more common problems do you notice?
So like I mentioned, right? I mean, when we do role plays and have best practices, you understand the questioning. One of the problem is CSRs not collecting all of the information.
Right,
So
about the
it's
service ticket.
About the service ticket, right? So not getting complete information or accurate information, right? And that's another big issue that we see. What happens is there's once they document inaccurate or incomplete information, it has a downstream impact, right? There's service costs. The technician is not taking the right parts or understand what the right issue is, or sometimes even assigning a wrong technician,
which is pretty bad. Absolutely. If that causes like multiple truck rolls, and then that technician needs to call someone to help him, so it's a massive impact on cost.
Absolutely. And also the customer experience, right? I
right
mean, they feel like you don't know what you're doing, or you don't have the right people that understand the job. So yeah,
wow, such a simple thing can have massive impact. Missing filling in a few fields in the ERP. And why does this typically happen? What are the more common root causes?
Well, the root cause could be, it's similar to other aspects, right? Not having trained them on the product and equipment. That's the key thing. That unless they understand the product, they'll not be able to kind of probe or diagnose or do some initial level troubleshooting.
Soft troubleshooting.
Some soft troubleshooting to be able to capture the data. So one of the key issues is that. And the other is also the curiosity or inquisitiveness of the CSR to be able to kind of, probe the questions.
Right. Do you also see maybe some of the root causes being lack of maybe documentation or like call guides, like, hey, here's the 3 things, 5 things, 10 things you need to ask on a call?
Absolutely. Just like pilots, right? They have a tight checklist, right?
Right.
Before the takeoff, they have to check also. That's a good example. So you need a checklist to kind of make sure that you've captured all of the key information.
Right.
So
and you standardize the process, no matter who's picking up the phone. These are the 3 things, or replying to in an email or updating a portal. Here are the X number of things that you need to check off your list before you endorse it to dispatch or to someone else. And how do you resolve these issues? It may be evident by just talking about the root causes, but how do you resolve these issues?
And I think we already looked at the root cause, and it answers the question, right? You give them the right training, train them on the jargons and the equipments, right? The audits, again, that helps to understand where there are gaps and where we need to kind of bridge the gap in terms of the understanding the product or not being able to troubleshoot, and also making quick reference guides and checklists available to them to kind of easily walk through the flow of the call while they're talking to the customer, and be able to check mark this. And
there's technology today that just like whenever a service call comes in, like the software already pops up like a chat, and it's like there's an AI listening to the call, and it's picking up keywords, and then it's adapting the information that the agent sees on the screen. So how much technology plays a role in resolving these issues, Mario?
No, I think technology plays a significant role, right? And even troubleshooting guides now with generative AI, it's easier. It'll give you best suggestive route of troubleshooting. The huge kind of implication of technology in improving customer service. And I think we're still at the very beginning of introducing generative AI in our industry, but I think in being able to kind of provide faster, better customer service, it's good to look at generative AI built troubleshooting guides.
And I know there's probably another dozen or more things that failures that happen in customer service. Is there any other problems that are more common across service companies you work with that you've picked up on?
So we've covered most of the aspects which are to do with a service query when you get a service request, right, an inbound call. But one of the key reason for customers to call is also calling in for disputes.
Right. So other than taking in a service call, and how's that being handled? So it's dispute resolution.
Yeah. So calling in for dispute, and then dispute resolution is one of the biggest issue. And of course, not having the right dispute resolution in time could also lead to a lot of customer service impact, right? It's not just for the service call, but not being able to resolve the dispute on time, not giving them the right response kind of leads to bad customer experience, and you see that frustration.
And you see that in a lot of the reviews online, like, hey, I challenged a charge, or I have a question about warranty or whatever, and they never got back to me. They never got back to me in time. So it has massive impact on customer experience. Absolutely.
And it also impacts internally, like cash flow, right, revenue flow. So if you don't have the dispute resolved fast enough, it delays your
customers are going to pay.
So it's just delaying your collection and cash flow, and also
makes sense. And why do these typically happen, delays in resolving disputes? Why does it happen, Mario?
I think one of the reason is because customer service are generally not accountable for the dispute. There's a lot of cross-functional interaction required. So they'll probably need to coordinate with the technicians, the
billing department
team.
Right.
So there's a lot of back and forth, and one of the problems is not having standard SOP, escalation matrix, or follow-up cadences, right, not built in. So that is one of the issues. The other is also lack of training and understanding of the billing. Well, they're so much focused on the customer service part of it, and creating this service order, they're not very well versed.
They don't understand what's happening in other departments.
Exactly.
Right.
It's also sometimes, like I said, we have so many omni-channel service, right? So sometimes they're so focused on the inbound of the service request, they forget about the the dispute resolution.
So they don't prioritize it. They're so busy.
They're so busy with just inbound service requests that gets following up and resolving dispute becomes second priority. And sometimes it's just customers, right, wanting to delay payment, just bad fit customers.
Right, bad fit. Right. So, and that's the unfortunate reality of running a business. Sometimes you're faced with bad fit customers. And how do you go about resolving these root causes, Mario?
So the best way to do it is, making sure you have established SOPs for cross-functional coordination. You establish cadences with, cross-functional heads, so that you don't have to
like a weekly meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that you have follow-up done thoroughly, and you also set internal turnaround time for responses, right?
Right. SLA between
KPIs.
Departments.
Correct. You have inter-department KPIs, and you measure that, report that, so that everyone is held accountable to their aspect of the
right. So always back to KPIs. You're always going back to KPIs. Any other?
Yeah, and of course, also looking at capacity, right? Because you're managing inbound calls, emails, portals. You're also managing dispute. And I've noticed some of the service companies, they kind of, in their IVR, right, when the customer is calling in, they're checking, are you calling in for a service request or a billing dispute? So you've got a dedicated resource just managing billing queries.
Right, you
specialize them.
Right.
So there's also some capacity management required there. And of course, proper training, right? Getting them to understand the bills, the invoices, what aspects of the invoice are generally disputed, and what are the rebuttals to give, so that you kind of diffuse some of those bad fit customers that are creating issues, but also you kind of explain the invoice to the customer sometimes,
right?
and
Because
you don't get
communication breakdown. Man, you notice that a lot of these problems almost have like same root causes, and it's so critical to measure these root causes and look and hunt them down, right? And obviously there's just so many things in customer service you need to be looking at that we'll probably spend a whole day talking about it. But something that we've done is we've developed like a survey to look across people, process, technology, data, and assess and look for some of these root causes. In probably less than 10 minutes we can identify if these root causes exist, and then help you pinpoint these problems in your operation. So if you're interested in doing a deep dive into your business and getting our expertise, we're actually making this assessment free to help you pinpoint breakdowns in potential breakdowns in your operation and resolve them. And look, no doubt customer service has massive impact on the service experience, and I would love for you to also maybe share with us some of the things that you've noticed that we may have glanced over or didn't cover, and how do you resolve it? Because again, at the end of the day, this is about building the playbook of operational excellence together, crowdsourcing the playbook together. And hey, if this episode has been helpful to you, please do share it with the operational leader in your organization who looks after customer service. And I'm really excited about not only talking about customer service, but covering the entire order to cash. And I believe the next episode will be about dispatch. So stay tuned for the next episode. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you around. Mario, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.